What's up guys, Imbasoth here, back for some Magic the Gathering content. Today, we are talking more spoilers, and there's some pretty good ones today, so let's jump right into it. So the first card we're going to talk about is Clay Champion. He is an X and 4 of any color for a 2/2 artifact creature construct. Clay Champion enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it for each green spent to cast. And when Clay Champion enters the battlefield, choose up to 2 target creatures you control. For each white spent to cast Clay Champion, put a 1/1 counter on each of them. I think this card is dope. In a mono green deck, you can play this for 4, and it's an 8/8, which is crazy on par, but it can also be played in a mono white deck where sure you get less counters, but those counters can attack immediately. So it's also very good. And you're still getting a good rate. You're getting 6/6 for 4 if you're just playing white. And if you're playing green-white, you have the choice of either putting counters on the creatures or on him. So I think that's very strong. And not to mention, he also has X at the end of there. So you can go bigger than him. So he's a great late game mana sink. So yeah, I think this card is actually pretty dope. I think the only problem that this card might have is that there might not be a mono green deck. There might not be a mono white deck. There might not be a Selesnya deck. But if there ever is, this guy's a good reason to play those colors. Ashnod Flesh Mechanic is 1 black for a 1/1 legendary creature human artificer. She has Death Touch, and whenever Ashnod Flesh Mechanic attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a tapped Power Stone token. And then 5 mana, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token. So 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch is actually pretty decent. Obviously it's not strong enough for it to see competitive play. The second ability is decent. I don't know how easy it'll be to get creatures that are worse than Power Stones, but there could be some decayed creature from Innistrad. Those are very low in power, so you feel less bad at sacrificing them to her. And if you're playing a deck where the Power Stones are good, getting a Power Stone early can actually generate a lot of mana throughout the turns if you're playing artifacts. So that's good to consider, but it would be kind of weird because you'd have to play a deck that wants to sacrifice small creatures and an artifact. I don't know if those will intertwine because they kind of need both to make this card good. Now her last ability is okay. It is just, you should note that the Power Stones can tap mana for her 5 abilities, so she can help bring out those 3/3 zombie artifacts. So yeah, I think this card does a lot of small things, but put them all together and you make a pretty strong card. Kyla's Reconstruction is X and 3 white for a sorcery. It has, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifacts and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Kaya's Reconstruction is very similar to Collected Company. Collected Company is a broken card. It saw a lot of play in Modern and dominated in Standard, but I think Collected Company is a better card. Kyla's Reconstruction is 3 white, so it's much harder to cast. It's not instant speed, and you need to pay 5 to get the same effect as Collected Company. But a bad Collected Company could still see play. So the card is awkward because it wants you to cast permanents with 3 or less. But if you want this card to be good, X needs to be at least 2, so it's a 5 mana spell, so it doesn't really work with other 3 mana spells. So this would work better in a more mid-rangey deck. I don't think it's going to see any play in aggressive decks because it's just too slow. But in that deck, it could be a good top deck. You play X for 3. I think X at 3 is the strongest. More than that, you have chances of not hitting the creatures you have. But you play this, and it's a good tempo. And also another problem with these cards, it can also go in artifact. There's always where you make a ton of mana, so you can cast this for 6 creatures or 7, and then I like that. You just put 7 is artifacts, but you can still, and then they can tap, and you can keep on doing it. So that could be pretty cool. The only problem with that is that it's 3 white mana. That will mess you up. You need a mono white deck to be able to play this, and white doesn't have that many artifacts. Also, you can't use Power Stones to pay the X because it's not an artifact spell, so you can't go crazy that way. Which this set is really pushing that archetype of Power Stone. So I wouldn't be surprised if I saw this card a couple times in the format, but I don't think it's going to be broken or really strong. I think it's just an okay. Soul Partition is one of any color and one white for an instant. It has exile target non-land permanent for as long as that card remains exiled. Its owner may play it. The spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. This card is pretty sweet tempo. The more expensive the card you're targeting with this, the more value you get. Because let's say if you target like a 5 mana spell, to recast it, they have to pay the 5 again and the 2. So it gets really efficient, slowing your opponents down. And it's also really neat that it can hit any non-land permanent, even planeswalkers. This is a very reactive card, so it's hard to tell if it's going to be strong in the format. If there's a lot of cards like Shieldred that come in and don't have an ETB, this card is amazing at slowing your opponent down. But if they have an ETB, if they have something good when enters the battlefield, making them be able to cast it again could actually give them card advantage, which makes the cards worse. And if you're against an aggressive deck that could really low to the ground and you're hitting like 1 or 2 drops, this card is much less efficient because you're losing a card and you're parodying them on mana. So you pay 2 mana, they have to. But yeah, it's a great way of slowing down to get into like a board wipe or a better position. Transmogrified Crown is 2 of any color for an artifact equipment. That equipped creature gets +2/+0. And whenever equipped creature dies, draw a card. Equipped 2 of any color or 1 black. This card is only playable in black decks. Paying 2 mana to equip is too much. But if you're playing a black deck, this is not that bad. It kind of reminds me of Skull Clamp. Obviously, Skull Clamp is better because it can kill your creature and it draws 2 cards and it's less expensive. But it's one of the most insane cards that ever existed. Obviously, this is not the same because it doesn't give you negative boost. But in an aggressive black deck, paying 1 mana to give your creature +2/+0 and draw a card when it dies is actually pretty strong. The only problem is that when you play it, it's tempo negative because you pay 2 mana to basically do nothing. And then you have to pay 3 mana to give your creature a boost. But if it keeps on going after that, it's very strong. It's also really good with Tenacious Underdog. You're paying 1 mana to deal 2 damage and draw a card every time you blitz him, which is a really good rate. And this card sees a ton of plays, so I'm half expecting this card to see some play. Maybe 1-ofs or 2-ofs, but nothing like crazy broken, but a pretty good card. Mirel, Shield of Argive is 2 white for a 2/2 legendary creature human soldier. She has, during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifact creatures or enchantment. And also, whenever Mirel, Shield of Argyle attack, creates X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. So I think this card is actually pretty crazy. If it had only one of the abilities, either of them, she would still be a decent card, but you put them both together, it's kind of crazy. Let's say you're playing against Mono Blue, a very popular deck right now. You're on the play. They go turn 1, nothing. You play this. Now they can't counter everything. If they don't have a Fading Hope, you just win the game with a 2-drop. Like, that's pretty crazy. And they are only running a 4-of. That's the only card that can deal with this. So yeah, I think this card is crazy. And then if you put it into soldier decks, it gets even more crazy. Because when you attack with her, you make soldiers. And then next turn, the more soldiers you have, the more soldiers you make. So every time you double every attack. So if she's not dealt with, if there's not like a big creature in her way, she will snowball really, really fast. And that's a lot of things for a 2-drop. So yeah, I think this card is good. And I was looking at the newer cards that came out, and there's actually a lot of soldier support. A lot of good soldiers are in here. So yeah, I think this card is good. It's kind of too bad it's a legendary creature, but that would be absolutely insane. So yeah, I think this card is good, and we'll see some play, which is sad because I really don't like mono white, but I like cool cards, so it's a cool one. So I wanted to talk more about the soldiers in this set, and this one is a really good one. So Harbin Vanguard Aviator is 1 white, 1 blue for a 3/2 legendary creature human soldier. It has flying, and whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying until end turn. So a 3/2 flyer is actually pretty strong by itself. So Meat Hook is gone, so you can go actually pretty wide on the board. And especially if you're running this beauty at the same time, you can actually make a lot of tokens if it works out. So hitting that last ability isn't as far-fetched as you would think. And if you do hit it, giving everything flyers probably just wins you the game. Hajar Loyal Bodyguard is 1 red and 1 green for a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier. He has Sacrifice Hajar Loyal Bodyguard. Legendary creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. So first of all, I want to talk about how funny it is with Bard class. If you're level 2, this guy costs 0 to put in, and you're obviously playing legendary deck because you're running Bard class. So his negative can actually be pretty good. Hajar is really good with Helena and Elena because when this card comes into play, if it's removed immediately, it's a complete blowout. Let's say they use Cut Down. They pay 1 mana to kill your 4 mana card. But if you have the Bodyguard, you can protect him and also give him a buff, which is important because then you'll get more counters. It makes this card way more consistent at continually buffing your boards. So I think this is a great combo. It is important to note that he is a soldier, so he can go in the soldier deck, although the soldiers we've seen were double white or white and blue, so it'd be really hard to get the mana right, but he can still fit that archetype, and at the end of the day it's 2 and a 3/3, and that's pretty powerful. So yeah, I think this card's pretty good. Arcane Proxy is 7 mana for a 4/3 artifact creature wizard. It has Prototype, which costs 1 of any color and 2 blue for a 2/1. He has, when Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. So either way, the Prototype or the normal cost, you're getting a pretty good mana cost for this. Let's say you're playing Prototype and you get a 2 mana spell. You're playing 1 mana for a 2/1. Or if you play for 7 mana, you get a 4 mana spell and you get 3 mana for a 4/3. Both of those are okay stats. It's too bad that both Blue's best card draw does not work with this creature. Either Silver Scrutiny X will be 0, so you won't draw cards, and Memory Deluge, you won't have paid any mana into it, so it's not going to give you any cards. And it doesn't work with counter spells because it's not instant speed. Either way of playing it, it is a 2-for-1, so this card is decent. If there is the right spells, it'll be very strong, or it might just be decent. Saheeli Filigree Master is 2 of any color, 1 blue, 1 red for 3 loyalty legendary planeswalker Saheeli. Her +1 is Scry 1. You may tap an untapped artifact you control. If you do, draw a card. -2. Create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. They gain haste until end of turn. -4. You get an emblem with artifact creatures you control. Get +1/+1 and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So her +1 is okay card advantage. If you got an extra artifact that you don't really need attacking or blocking, you can convert it into a card, which is pretty good. Scry 1 draw card is really good. Her -2 is good couple ways. It's 2 blockers to protect her when she comes in. It's 2 haste damage to opponent's face, maybe to finish them off. And it's also good at the end, you can tap those artifacts to draw, so it works with the +1. And then her alt is pretty interesting. Most alt on planeswalkers are pretty useless, but with hers, let's say you put her down, turn 4, you uptick, scry draw, and the next turn you can alt. And at that point, you either should have a big board or a big hand. This card helps you either way, and even better when it goes together. You can cast a ton of things and they get so much bigger, and they could deal that final damage you need to win. Also, in a control matchup, you can uptick to 5 before you alt, and then you alt, and then you uptick, and the amount of value that it'll give you, that'll probably win you the game. Being able to draw cards with the same time them being buffed and cost reduced by 1, she can get pretty powerful. So yeah, I think this planeswalker is very flexible, and I don't think it's broken, but I think it's decent. So that is all for the video today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It's a new channel. It needs a bit of a push. Yeah, have a good one.